Welcome to SEC Football Live, tape delay here on the 440 Sports Network. My name is Braden Gall. We are brought to you, of course, by ML Rose. 6 great locations all across Middle Tennessee, with the 7th location coming soon to my neighborhood, which my family cares deeply about. David Waters from Gators Breakdown joining us here this morning on the show. We're going to get a State of the Union on the Florida Gators following a basketball national championship, as he's sporting the merch. If you're watching on YouTube, of course, thumbs up, subscribe, notifications, etc. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm good, Braden. Thanks for having me. Sorry for the miscommunication. But glad we were able to get on here. But yeah, certainly it's been a whirlwind of a week. Staying up to like 3:30 in the morning after Florida wins the basketball title. So it's messed up my whole week, and I guess it's in a good way, but it's just thrown me off a bit.
Good problems to have there, big guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And don't tell anybody how the sausage is made behind the YouTube digital audio content curtain there. All right, so we're going to talk DJ Lagway. We're going to talk his arm. We're going to talk his talents. We're going to talk recruiting. I want to dive into the state of the program. This is what I do in the spring. We talk to folks from around the SEC, and of course, we dive deep into sort of the inner workings of the administration and what's going on and expectations and roster management and all this good fun stuff that now is possible due to the current form of college football. But I do want to start with basketball, and I'm just curious. Obviously, sort of an interesting way that Todd Golden and the program went about building the team. I'm just curious if you learned anything, or if you think other teams or coaches or programs should learn anything from how Florida went about building the team that eventually, of course, one of those players from right here in Nashville at Belmont, but what did you learn, you think, from how he went about building a championship caliber roster?
Well, I think it told us, basketball is different from football. You don't need the 5 stars and highly rated guys. Florida only has one top 100. One 4-star and no top 100 recruits on the roster. So in this new world of, college athletics now, the transfer portal was a huge part of it. And look, every team's doing it. But I sit here and say, development, I guess, played a huge role in what Todd Golden and his staff was able to do. You had, of course, Walter Clayton, who transferred from Iona. You had, as you mentioned, Will Richard from Belmont. Transferred there to Florida. And then those guys have been around the program. And then went and got Elijah Martin from FAU, who had made a Final Four appearance at that school. That was their 3-guard lineup right there. And all those guys come from the transfer portal. And look, you go back to a year ago, and Florida had got bounced by Colorado in the first round of the tournament. And it was, hey, we have got to fix our defense. We're good offensively. We have got to fix our defense. That was one reason they went and got Elijah Martin there from FAU, one of the best defenders in the country. And Florida ends up a top 10 defense to go along with their top 10 offense. So they were an elite offensive team, still top 10 in defense. So, Braden, I don't know if Todd Golden unlocked anything different than anybody else. He's hit the transfer portal like everybody. But as I said, I think it's just a credit to him for being a third-year coach and being able to figure it all out. Or, a third-year coach at Florida. I think it's a 6th year overall. But coming to the SEC, coming to a program, and in his 3rd year, being able to put together a roster when the conference had been as deep as it has ever been, as good as it has ever been. And he was able to put together a roster there that didn't rely on the big names. So you hope this turns into getting the big names. But for Todd Golden, I don't think it was anything special as far as putting the roster together. I think it was probably more the development part of it.
Do you think there's any, and this is sort of a transition into the entire athletic department, but I'm just curious, do you think it's a sign? Obviously, this particular season was not without its own storylines outside of the basketball program, meaning with the coach, obviously. Mm-hmm. But obviously, the athletic department was in a certain place in the mid-2000s where you had Urban Meyer winning championships. We know what was going on kind of behind the scenes. We had Florida with Billy Donovan winning back-to-back national championships. It was a premium sort of era. Then there's all kinds of transition. Obviously, you get a baseball championship kind of in between in 2017. One of the best programs in the country. Where does this tell you anything? Napier having a good season, sort of figuring it out, at least to some degree. You've got basketball now doing this the way it's doing it. Does it tell you anything about the state, the stability? Obviously, the front office, quote unquote, at Florida has been going through a lot as well. What does this tell you about where the athletic department is from a stability standpoint moving forward?
Well, Brady, you mentioned, because in that transition away from Mike White and transition away from Dan Mullen, it was Florida, for whatever reason, going to get the up-and-coming guys. It was Billy Napier, the up-and-coming Sun Belt coach. It was Todd Golden, the up-and-coming coach from San Francisco. And a lot of people were asking themselves, Florida's a big enough name. Why don't they get somebody established? Why don't they get somebody? Dan Mullen was that established name, by the way, at Mississippi State, and it just didn't work out. So I think you finally kind of maybe get past that just a bit. Now we'll see what football holds, and a lot of people were kind of wait and see mode for 2025. But Brady, it's funny you mentioned that because as soon as Florida wins that title for basketball, it's okay. What can they do next year? But also, it's like, hey, remember the last time Florida did this in basketball? The football team was right on their heels in winning a title. So, look, there's been a lot of positive mojo for the football program, as you mentioned, with the way they ended last year. But, hey, we got to remember, that was a special time. That is very, very hard to do. I mean, Florida's the only school to do it in the first place.
Yep.
But, of course, natural way of looking at it is, hey, let's just go repeat what we did last time. But look, that's going to be hard. But I think it does probably relieve some pressure from Scott Strickland in getting a basketball national title, and the way the football season ended. You got to be able to continue it in football. It probably does relieve some of the pressure for him, giving him a little more of a cushion if football doesn't work out. You probably can sit there and say, well, a basketball title may save his job in the end. But just really continues, Braden. If Florida puts an emphasis on sports, and it's usually – Florida is a football school, but we have seen it where it branches out. Florida will win a title in basketball, baseball, track and field, tennis, all that stuff. Florida's a really, really good athletic program. This kind of just continues that. And I think people were just waiting in this new world of NIL and roster building in any sport. Can Florida still be that type of school? And I think this type of title proved, yes, that they can still be that.
Well, we got to talk about the quarterback, of course. Not throwing in spring becoming a hot topic. I'm not sure how much that should concern folks or not. So I guess my first question is, what does that mean to you as someone who covers the team? And more importantly, I'd like to get into your experience around the program. Lots of different types of quarterbacks in this program. Rex Grossman and Kyle Trask, two very different types of quarterbacks. Chris Leak and Tim Tebow, two very different types of quarterbacks. I'm just curious what makes DJ Lagway special. And, of course, please give us an update on arm gate or throwing gate or spring practice gate, or how concerned we should be about his not throwing in spring practice.
Brady, I said right when spring practice started and Billy Napier said, yeah, he's going to be limited. I said, well, let's just get through spring and see if he ever starts throwing. Well, I don't think he's going to. So your spring game is Saturday, and I don't expect him to really take part in that. So certainly that raised the concern level a bit. I think when you look at it, that first tells me he probably needs a break, probably needs some rest, and rest for whatever it is to heal. So I think the concern now is, does it heal the right way? I mean, if this is what they're waiting on, if there's a timeline and it's got to get better, is rest the only thing, or is rest to see the next step? Like, all right, it's rested. Now is it fully healed? And if it's not, then are we starting to talk surgery? And then are we starting to talk about, does it go into the season a little bit? That's the scary part for me is, this tells me he needs rest. It doesn't tell me if that's going to heal it or not. That's the way I look at it. So that's the concern.
Is it like a pitcher's arm where the rest may help it, but the rest may also just lead to the point where you can actually just analyze it? Is that what you're saying?
That's where I'm going with it. Yes, absolutely. So there's not a lot coming out about it, of course, understandably, with your 5-star quarterback. To me, if it was terrible, I think it would have already come out.
Yeah.
But I still think there is a huge question mark by not. You'd rather him throw. I mean, look, Florida's got a bevy of receivers that have coming in. The highly touted true freshman and Vernell Brown and Dallas Wilson and Nashawn Montgomery, Aiden Mizell coming back, J. Michael Sturdivant from the transfer portal. You'd love for him to get that rapport this spring with so many new faces in the receiver room. But certainly you want him out there the first time ball hits field in fall camp. So there's definitely should be concern with him not throwing all spring and just the questions surrounding it. So certainly Florida's going to need him to live up to those expectations for 2025.
All right. Well, then when fully healthy, I know we only saw him for 7 starts last year, 6-1 in those starts. Obviously a very talented player, big 5-star. We all know all the details. I'm just curious. Like, I have my own personal opinion about his size and his processing and his accuracy, but you've been on the ground there for a long time. I'm just curious, what are the traits that you think set him apart relative to maybe past quarterbacks at Florida?
Yeah, we talked to Ryan O'Hara, the quarterback coach, last week during spring practice, and he said he's got the best feeling of a game he's ever been around. Like, he just knows the game of football. And that's what picks him up. So, and then, like, I remember he going back to his recruitment, and he's getting Florida's playbook early. He's getting balls shipped from Florida, like actual football shipped from Florida. So he knows that's the type of football that he's playing with. That's the preparation that goes into DJ Lagway being the quarterback. That's the way he wanted to attack it. But and I think you could see that for a freshman last year when he probably didn't know the full playbook. He was thrust out there because Graham Mertz gets injured, and you could see he just had a great feel for the game. That doesn't mean it was perfect all the time, but you could just tell as a freshman there were just moments that were like, okay, yeah, he gets it. Now, there's a lot of things to learn, and there's a lot of things to improve on, but he gets the game of football. So I think that's, for a true freshman being able to do those things, and now more than ever taking mental reps because they can't take the physical reps. So you hope that translates. But I think that is something that stood out originally. And I was glad to hear Ryan O'Hara kind of just confirm what we kind of already thought, that he has such a great feel for the game and the physical talents stand out. I mean, we know he can launch the ball 70, 80 yards down the field. Got that shot put motion sometimes that just kind of blows you away with it. But certainly, as far as room for improvement, of course, you got to get better than that. Like I said, we know he can launch the ball down the field. Now it's the short intermediate, knowing when to settle, hit that 10, 15-yard pass, get the right checks in. But I think that could be an added bonus, maybe, of him not throwing, is getting all those mental reps. But we all know it's a little bit different when the bullets start flying. So it's all got to come together. But I do like hearing that the moxie is there.
It's funny. Like I had my wife and my daughters were at the Tennessee Florida game in Knoxville, and I'll never forget being in the crowd, just being like, I hope Mertz is coming back. Like that's sort of the energy in the crowd was like, you could just feel in person that the game moved differently and it's not intended to be a knock on Mertz at all.
Right.
That's not.
He was playing good that game as well.
Right, but I was like, oh yes. Everybody around me was just like, oh yes, here comes the backup quarterback, and I was like, I don't know, guys. I don't know if that's what you want to be saying. And you could just feel it be different. And of course, then the fourth quarter unfolded, and Lagway was able to bring him all the way back. So it was you could just feel it in the building that there's a different presence there. So obviously quarterbacks are force multipliers on the field. You just already alluded, I was going to ask you about this, but you already alluded to the increase in talent at the skill position, something the Florida Gators have been known for since I can remember watching college football with the Jarquez Green, Riedel Anthony, sort of Ike Hilliard teams in the mid-90s. It seems like he's becoming at least somewhat of a force multiplier outside of football in terms of recruiting as well. It sounds like that's the impact he's having also.
Yeah, that for sure. I think this young receivers certainly wanted to play with him. You got 2 5-stars in Vernell Brown and Dallas Wilson, who, through all reports, now we know how spring lies can be, Braden, but through all reports, the freshmen are really, really stepping up at this wide receiver position. And J. Michael Sturdivant, for the transfer from UCLA, remember Florida brought in Elijah Badger last year, and he was that really deep threat. He's one of the conference's best deep threat receivers, and that's what they really expect J. Michael Sturdivant to step right into that X spot and be that same type of receiver, be that big physical threat down the field. And playing with DJ Lagway, and what we could see him passing the ball down the field was a big pull for J. Michael Sturdivant. So certainly, I think look at what Florida's done in the transfer portal recently at receiver. They've brought in Ricky Pearsall, and he turned into a first-round pick. Chimere Dike was at Wisconsin with Graham Mertz, ends up being a really good SEC receiver there for Florida. And I just mentioned Elijah Badger as well. So Florida's had a lot of success through the transfer portal at the wide receiver position, and then coming in with DJ Lagway last year, a big part in pulling J. Michael Sturdivant in. So I think Florida feels pretty good, even though they got to replace those guys at receiver, and feeling good with what they have. 4 or 5 offensive linemen returning there for the Gators as well. And then the running back position, Montrell Johnson's gone, but we saw Jaden Ball burst into the scene last year. Jacoby Jackson burst onto the scene last year. So it is a team on offense that does return a lot of key pieces. Receiver is the biggest question, but just because of all the new faces there. But with that type of quarterback, with 4 or 5 offensive linemen returning and running back, there's plenty of skill to go along with them. So certainly you can see where Florida is starting to feel better themselves with recruiting and what they've been able to do in the transfer portal at that receiver spot.
I don't want to ask like sort of what changed down the stretch, because I think the defense, it's pretty obvious with the quarterback and the defense and how they progressed throughout the course of the year. But I'm curious sort of like how much of that is sustainable versus how much still needs to be another step of development we'll get to preseason expectations, which are already off the charts for this team. How much of that is like real and sustainable versus the moment in a really brutal schedule, and how much of it is like, hey, this is just the first step to sort of the next step of the evolution? And again, if you believe in the Billy Napier slow build, some do and some do not. I get that, but what is the next step in the evolution based on what you saw at the end of last year?
Yeah, and let's go to defense there, Braden, because it was a lot of bend don't break against LSU and a lot of bend don't break versus Ole Miss. I don't know if that's sustainable. Now, Florida should be better up front. Tyreek Sapp comes back, surprisingly, one of the highest returning players in the SEC, if you want to go along to Pro Football Focus grades. Yeah. Caleb Banks returns as well, so Florida has some experience up front from two guys that were probably the two best players up front down the stretch for the Gators last year. And then one of the best linebacker groups in the country, one of the best linebacker groups in the SEC, with how deep they can go and how youthful they are, with Miles Graham and Aaron Childs. Pup Howard returns, Jaden Robinson returns as well. Florida really, really likes what they have at linebacker. But then questions in the secondary. They're fighting through injuries all spring long. It was a group that I do think that defensive line helped last year, but credit to them. When I say that bend don't break, Florida was giving up big play after big play against Miami earlier in the season, Texas A&M earlier in the season. That was, lended itself to those losses. They stopped those big plays. And now they were still, like I said, giving up yards, but stood up in crunch time. So I think when Florida, the first step to me in taking that next step this year is just build on that bend, don't break approach on defense. You got to be not so bend, don't break coming up. And I do think with what they have returning up front that they can do that. Ron Roberts returns. This is the first returning defensive coordinator Billy Napier's had since he's been at Florida. So that I think can go a long way as well. So when I do think about taking that next step, we talked about offense, but for me, it is that defense just being a little more consistent. And I don't think you can get away with bend, don't break all season long if you want to be a college football playoff contender.
If you go to a public library in Florida, I've been told that those two game tapes are banned. You can't get either of those two game tapes. It's amazing what experience will do on a defensive coaching staff, right? I mean, that's what it feels like the transition was to last year, was a bunch of experience. You mentioned some of the players coming back. I'm curious. It feels like the secret sauce in college football the last couple of years, in particular with Michigan and Ohio State, just as an example, was investing in their own rosters. Certainly you need recruiting, you need the portal, you need management, you need development, you need all that stuff. But one of the ingredients has been investing in the pieces that you have. Penn State's all in on that this year. It feels like that's how Florida invested its resources. So I guess the first question is, like talent-wise, where is this group relative to the other years under Billy Napier? And what is the current state of the NIL collective, the dollars, the booster class? Where are they at in terms of their resources to kind of keep teams like this intact?
Pretty good, Braden. And you're right. It was an offseason path for Florida. As I mentioned, Tyreek Sapp, Caleb Banks coming back, 4 or 5 offensive linemen coming back, being able to hang on to, and that's not just guys thinking about maybe going to the NFL or not. NIL comes into play as well as, I got to make sure this guy doesn't go to another school. I mean, we saw Trevor Etienne go to your biggest rival a year ago. So a part of that was doing because Florida wasn't winning as well. But Florida was able to win. Florida had some young guys like a Jaden Ball, Jacoby Jackson at the running back spot. Florida's deep at running back. And so you're going to have to, sell those guys on playing time and NIL. We saw it hurt Florida at the edge position. Jack Pyburn goes to LSU. TJ Searcy goes to Texas A&M. Justice Boone goes to Arkansas. So Florida did get hit a bit at the transfer spot because Florida's like, hey, look, we got 3 edge guys here in George Gums, who's returning, Pyburn, TJ Searcy, and we can't play all 3 of these guys. Yeah. Their production is pretty similar to all 3. If you want to go somewhere because you want more playing time and more NIL money, you're probably going to have to, because we're not going to pay all 3 edge guys at the same spot. That's just the world of college football right now. And it hurts a little bit because Jack Pyburn grew up in Jacksonville, grew up a diehard Gator fan, and now he's playing for LSU. And so that's just the new world there of college football. NIL's in a good spot. Yeah, they were able to pay all those guys coming back and returning. They only had to hit the transfer portal for 5 guys. And that was the roster Billy Napier's built. As you mentioned, the slow build. that's going to lend itself to him wanting to develop his own guys and keep his own guys in. And I think we saw that this past season by bringing in only 5 transfer portal guys. As I mentioned, they decided to bring so many guys back returning. So it's in a good spot. I think overall, Braden, when people look at numbers for Florida's NIL and collective, when it relates to football, it's about top 10-ish there. Yeah. So, I mean, look what you got at quarterback. You know you're paying a lot there, so in breaking it up. But it was a clear path for this year's 2025 team to bring back so many key pieces.
Well, and it seems like they've like you and I have talked about this. There's not a huge number of giant boosters for Florida. There's a smaller number maybe for Florida than for other schools. Equally as passionate, of course, but it's got to be sort of a focused and targeted effort currently, and it does feel like they've gotten and improved that area. As rules will come in, it's going to regulate all this stuff and make it even. But like for now, you kind of have to do it your own. And I'm curious what you make of the in-state situation. Miami and Cristobal. I don't think Cristobal is a great football coach, but he is a great talent, acquisition guy, and they are paying exorbitant amounts of money for Carson Beck, whatever. Florida State's having a big, one of the worst seasons in the history of the program. South Florida is spending $400 million to build its first on-campus stadium. UCF is sort of doing the UCF thing, which is just sort of
Scott Frost coming back,
just bouncing around, causing havoc in everybody's life all the time. What do you make of the in-state dynamics? Is this an opportunity? Do the boosters and the powers that be realize that if they get their stuff aligned and Napier is the guy and Lagway's the guy and all this stuff, that there's sort of an opportunity here with Florida State taking a huge step back? I think Cristobal is very good at bringing in talent. I don't know if they're going to finish the deal because I just question his in-game coaching ability. Is there an opportunity here if everything falls into place for Florida to sort of reassert its dominance in the state?
Braid, I think so, because I think the perfect example of it is just how the season played out and how it played out on the recruiting trail. Go back to last year and going into last year, Florida's recruiting was like, 50th in the country. Really couldn't do much on the recruiting trail. Then November comes. This is after now you got blasted by Miami in the first game of the season.
Yeah.
Then November comes. Florida starts winning. And it turns out, now we know NIL plays a factor too, but okay, that's there. The recruits needed to see Florida win. Florida started winning, and they went on a November spree in recruiting and really put nice finishing touches on their early signing day class. And then, Braden, here we are. It was early April where Florida signs their very last player of the 2025 class, Javari Flowers, who flips from a 2026 commit recruit to a 2025 recruit. Commits, I think it was March 31st. So here we are talking April 1st. We're talking a recruit in the 2025 class that boosted Florida's class to number 7 overall. I think it was 4th in the SEC behind Georgia, Texas, and Alabama. So I think that was a good indication of how it all played out. I think recruiting was really a perfect example of maybe where it is going in the state of Florida. And the recruits just needed to see Florida put something together on the field, something to believe in, because we've seen it. And, that 2023 class that got off to such a great start, and Florida's class was number 1 at one point, and then just kind of faltered down the stretch because Florida wasn't winning ball games. Florida started winning ball games, big games in the swamp where recruits could see it at Ole Miss and against LSU, beat your in-state rival Florida State to end the season. And, I just think they needed something tangible to believe in. And I think recruiting is the best example to me, showing when you look at the in-state, that's a good example of how it's heading for Florida.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And by the way, I'm not trying to be insulting to Miami. They are the better program right now. That Cam Ward was dominant. They won the game in easy fashion. I'm not trying to discount any of that. I just think long term, there's a chance for someone to step into the void a little bit with Florida State taking a huge step back. You could step into a void, and I think you can challenge Miami if you've got the right coaching staff, and that we'll get to that in just a second.
Braden, on that point, history shows us Florida and Florida State in the 90s. Two programs in the state can be that.
Yeah, no question.
And it might be Miami and Florida. But I do think, we wondered, oh, man, so much was hanging on that season opening game last year against Miami, and you get blasted. And this is like, okay, well, this is just not heading in the right direction. Everybody thought that. And then credit to the team and program for rallying themselves. So I think a lot's going to be hanging on this game again with Florida, Miami, just kind of showing where the programs are.
It's like week 4, right? Something like
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
Look, I don't know what's going to happen in that game. I'm just telling you, if they both get to a playoff game and they're both 10-2, I'm taking the coaching staff I trust the most, and it's not Mario Cristobal. In the game, at least.
Yeah.
Not building a roster, he's great, but in the game, I'm taking Florida in that matchup. All right, before I got one more question about expectations and preseason rankings. I know it's early for all of that, but we're going to end with that. But before we do, of course, if you're ever in Nashville, David, and you want to come into town. And you want to come see the Country Music Hall of Fame and all that great stuff, make sure you swing by ML Rose. They have great burgers. They have craft beer. They have the best craft beer. In fact, they are one of the establishments that helped build the craft beer industry in Nashville. They were one of the few bars that were putting all the local beers on tap. So if you come to Nashville, you're going to get local flavor, local beer, local products, local food. ML Rose is great. 6 great locations all over the mid-state area. So no matter where you're staying, if you're coming into town, of course, make sure you check out ML Rose. Great drink specials on Saturdays. So if you're watching college football, if you're watching college basketball, if you're watching college baseball, they've got great drink specials on Saturdays. Start with the SEC, obviously. The sausage, egg, and cheese biscuit there, of course, on Saturday mornings on their brunch menu. 2-for-1 drink specials as well. ML Rose. All right. Preseason top 15. We're already working on our magazine at Athlon. We're working on putting it together, and there's a lot of debate. South Carolina, Tennessee, even Alabama, Texas A&M's getting some love as well. There's a cluster of teams in there that are kind of in that second tier. Florida's absolutely in that group. Now, in the modern era of playoff football, you're going to have to start pinpointing teams that do very well in roster management in the offseason, whether it's the portal or retention, like Florida has done. They've got the star quarterback, and they've got a little stability at the coaching staff for now. Those are the things I think I'm looking for a team that's going to take a jump. There's going to be Indiana's or other types of teams, SMU's, teams that you don't necessarily expect to get in that group. Florida is going to have high expectations. The schedule is really nasty. Is top 15 playoff challenge 10 wins with 2 losses with that schedule? Is that a reasonable expectation for this particular roster?
Has to be. Talked about all the returning pieces. I think you built for this. If you're Billy Napier, the way you recruited and the way you wanted these certain players to return. I mean, Florida's really high returning production. I went and detailed that in this past offseason. Florida's near tops in the SEC in returning production who played well at the same time there for the Gators. So certainly, Brady, I think so. And look, we're going into year 4 for Billy Napier. I mean, it's time. I mean, you got your quarterback, as you mentioned, and the roster's there. If you're Florida, and look, this is not even specific to Billy Napier. If you're a Florida coach in year 4, I'm expecting whoever it is to be in contention for a college football playoff spot and an SEC championship. That's nothing special. And that's nothing, putting too much expectation on Billy Napier. That's for any coach who's good enough to stick around for year 3, year 4, year 5. You need to be in contention. And I think when you look at the SEC and there's so much turnover at the quarterback position, and you got one of the ones that everybody would love to have behind center, I think you start looking at Florida as a team. Look, and you're right. The schedule, once again, is brutal. That might make it difficult for that Indiana style of a team.
Exactly.
Built
on a schedule, by the way. I love Indiana, but that was a schedule run for sure.
Right. They're not doing that, in a Big Ten if their schedule was right. They just got the right side of the Big Ten. And the reason I say that is I don't want to call the Big Ten weak. They just got the right side of the Big Ten.
No, it's Missouri. Missouri, Missouri had 2 really tough games last year, and they got crushed by Alabama and A&M. Yeah. They won most of the other ones. So scheduling differentials now with bigger leagues is a very, very real factor.
And I hated the way the SEC did it, by the way. Oh, let's just throw out 1 year. You know what? Let's run it back the next year. Come on. Not because of a Florida perspective. I just thought that's pretty boring.
Oklahoma fan agrees with you as well.
Yeah, right. But it was boring. I mean, like, okay, Florida's got to play. Granted, I don't mind playing Texas. Now they're coming to the Swamp, but I was like, okay, it would have been cool for Florida to play Oklahoma in the next year. It'd been cool just to kind of rearrange the opponents for the next year. Yeah. But it's certainly is going to play a factor. I wouldn't say Florida would be that Indiana style program, because overall Florida should be better.
And just to be fair, that's not what I wasn't trying to I was just saying a team that nobody really expected and sort of kind of grew quickly into itself. There's no real comparison between the two programs, to be fair. I want to make sure I'm clear on that.
Right. So, I think the expectation is right. Top 15 fighting for a college football playoff spot just because of what you have coming back in. This is the program. This is the team built in your image.
If things don't go his way, and they could still be a good football team,
right?
And things may not go the way we are talking. 10-2, I think 9-3, you're totally safe. I think 8-4 is sort of that crazy mid-range, depending on how it looks and who you lose to. But that's still a good team against a really tough schedule, which could still have, like you mentioned, the receiving core, the linebacking core being young. You're fixing position groups year in and year out, and it still could be building for something even more special the following year. Is the administration in a different place this year to where they could make a move if they wanted to, if something were to happen and things don't go the way fans expect?
I think it would still have to be a disaster, Braden, to move on. 8-4 keeps him around. 7-5 probably keeps him around as well. 7-5 would, I think, really tick off Gator Nation. You're in such limbo there. But disaster would be 6-6 or worse. And I think, to me, you have to make a move at that point. I don't see how you would defend that. I know anybody could sit here and say, well, do you really want to start over with DJ Lagway at quarterback and he could leave and all that stuff? I get that angle of it, but you've probably shown me enough in 4 years that it's just not going to work out if you somehow have a disaster of a season. Now, that's barring any injuries and all that kind of stuff at that point. But you can still argue, well, the roster should be in a better shape than it should have been if you go 6-6. So I get that angle of it as well. So, man, it's a thin line for Florida. It really is. You are talking about a team that really can compete for a college football playoff spot, but would it really shock anybody if Florida went 6-6? I don't think it would shock anybody.
Well, there's some excuses built into this thing that don't exist anymore, right? Like the collective has been figured out.
Yeah.
The rosters, you've had 4 years now to figure out the roster. You've got your star quarterback. Everyone knows how brutal the schedule is. That's just the life in the SEC. Yep. You got a better, more talented roster probably than ever before. Like all the things are there. So I agree. I don't know if I'm picking them to make the playoff right now as we're doing the magazine. I may get there by the end of the summer. I'm not picking them to make the playoff, but I certainly don't think the disaster is coming at all. I think they're going to be pretty damn good. So that's my theory. All right. Well, look, things are good in Gator Nation. You got the championship you're celebrating. Baseball season's underway, which is in our territory. The country is a great time of the year. And of course,
not so well for Florida this year so far, but we'll see.
Well, hey, look again.
Got a series win over FSU this week. So
I have an 8-year-old, now a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old that are celebrating the national championship still. So I'll talk a little trash to a Florida fan while we're talking. Okay, all right. So tell everybody where they can find all your work. Gators Breakdown. Give us the whole rundown.
Yep. At GatorDave_SEC on the X Twitter sphere, GatorsBreakdown.com, and YouTube, of course, and podcast platform to catch the podcast. Florida spring game Saturday. So I don't think we'll see DJ Lagway, but we'll be talking plenty about it anyway.
Great place for Florida Gator coverage. If you're listening or watching to this and you don't know David, I don't know how to help you. I'm sure you do. So thank you so much, man, for your time. We do appreciate it. And congrats on the championship, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Braden.